Today we're going to talk about flams. Now flams are something that you'll see in snare drum music that other instruments would call grace notes, right? But instead of grace notes on snare drum, we call them flams. We'll talk about what they look like on the page in another video. Okay, so the basic idea here is we're playing one small note before our main note, right, or our primary note, okay? So the primary note itself will just be like any other stroke we play on snare drum. So it'll look like this, right? And we're just gonna put a little note right before it, okay? So a little note here, big note here, little note, followed by a big note. So typically when we play flams, we want them to be pretty close together, okay? Something like this, right? We don't usually want them to be really far apart, although there's a time and a place for that as well, okay? So a couple of exercises to get us moving on flams, right? The first one is we're gonna play both of our hands together at the exact same time, okay? Right, and this is just to set up the timing of how our hands are gonna move to actually execute these flams, okay? So both hands together, get used to doing that. Okay, now we're gonna take one hand, we're gonna take one hand and move it to a lower position, inch or two off the surface. Other hand stays the same, and now exact same motion in the hands, just this one's smaller, okay? But the timing is the same. Okay, then we can go back to both hands. Right, and get used to that timing again. Right, and then let's put the right hand down, left hand up, right? And same timing in the hands from two different heights. Okay, so those are what we call consecutive flams, right? And so something you can do, a fun exercise you can do with consecutive flams is to really listen to the distance between the notes and then try to manipulate that, right? So I'll show you what I mean. I'm gonna play a few consecutive flams with my right hand. Okay, now I'm gonna see if I can move the grace note and the primary note further away from each other, right? So the little note is gonna happen a little sooner, big note's gonna happen a little bit later, and there's a little more space between the flam notes, okay? So we'll listen to that. Right? So now I'm gonna go to my original one. I'm gonna do 8 of those, and then I'm gonna do 8 with the notes more spread out, okay? And spread out. Right, and the difference is really, really subtle, but you can hear in there that it's two very different things when the notes are, you know, this close together versus this close together, okay? Now we can take that a step further and try to put the notes exactly on top of each other, right? So the same way that a minute ago we had both sticks hitting at the same time, right? We're gonna try to get that same effect, but with our grace note starting lower, right? So like this, and then play the, try to get both sticks to hit at the exact same time. All right, that's easier said than done. It can be a little bit challenging, right? But now we have three different variations of this flam, right? We have the notes wide apart, we have them exactly on top of each other, and then we have somewhere in the middle, okay? Usually that somewhere in the middle is what you're gonna use, but it's nice to be able to control it through those extremes, right? Through the right on top of each other, all the way to the really spread out version of the flam, right? That way you have the flexibility to play anywhere in between, okay? So really fun exercise. I don't know that if you will call it fun, but I call it fun, is to play 8 spread out, 8 in the middle, 8 on top of each other, okay? So let's try that. 1, 2, ready, and nice and wide. Now in the middle. Now on top of each other. Okay, and again, this the on top of each other flams and the really spread out flams are going to be a little more rare that you would use those, right? But again, it's about being able to control the distance between the grace note and the primary note, right? Let's move over to the left hand, but quickly before we do that, you'll notice I've been using the terms primary note and grace note, right, for the flams. A lot of times that's how we differentiate between the two components of a flam, right? So the small note would be a grace note, right? And that's what any other instrument would call this type of notation, where there's a little note and then a big note, all right? So when we say a right-handed flam or a left-handed flam, we're referring to which note the primary note, or which hand the primary note is played with, if that makes sense, okay? So when I'm playing this way with my right hand playing the big note and my left hand playing the little note, I'm gonna call that a flam on my right hand, okay? Same thing on the other side. If I'm playing the primary note with my left hand and the grace note with my right hand, I'm gonna call that a left-handed flam, okay? So with those terms cleared up, let's try a few of these exercises on the left hand, okay? So first let's play a few just regular down the middle flams. Okay, and then let's try some nice and wide. Okay, and then let's try some on top of each other. Yeah, and the flams hitting at the exact same time are the most difficult to execute, at least for me. Okay, so now on the left hand, let's do 8 wide, 8 in the middle, 8 on top of each other. Here we go, nice and wide, ready, and... in the middle. And on top, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so those are some good exercises that you can do for flams, or for consecutive flams, right? Now, when we want to play alternating flams, right, or flams on one hand, switching to the other and back and forth, right, then we execute these a little bit differently, okay? So we've been playing, consecutive notes, consecutive grace notes with one hand, consecutive full strokes with the other hand to make this happen. But if we want to alternate, then what we have to do is get the primary note to stay down while we prep the hand that just played the grace note to play the primary note on the other side, okay? So you think about, leave the primary note down, lift the grace note. Primary note down, lift the grace note. Yeah, and if you haven't done this before, there's a lot of coordination involved, but one thing that's really helpful to do here, if it feels tricky, is to isolate one hand or the other hand, okay? So if we take one hand out of the equation, what we have going on is a downstroke, leave the stick down, and then an upstroke, right? Or pull the stick up, right? So big note, leave the stick down. Little note, pick the stick up. Big note, leave it down. Little note, pick it up. You'll notice if I add my other hand in, that's exactly what's going on here. Down, up, okay? Let's try the same thing on the left hand, right? It's the same pattern. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, okay? And then what we have to do is just play them opposite of each other, right? But that's a little bit tricky to throw all together if you're not used to doing this sort of thing, right? So one thing we can do to kind of bridge the gap is to play down, up, but do it both hands at the same time. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Okay, and once that's comfortable, then you can offset them and alternate. And then we have our alternating flams. Another exercise you can do if that is still feeling kind of uncomfortable after you take it through those couple of variations that we talked about, is to do one hand a couple times and then add both hands, right? So I take my right hand and play that down up pattern by itself, and then add my left hand, and then go back to the right. What I'm going to do is just pay attention to my right hand and make sure that the motion stays the same. Even when I add my left hand, nothing changes in my right hand. One more time. Down, up, and then left hand's in. Okay? You can do the same thing on the left hand, right? So down, up, bring in the right hand. Back to just the left. Bring in the right. Okay? And then once you're comfortable with all that, we can take this through the same variations that we did with our consecutive flams, right? Where we play the flams nice and big and open, and then down in the middle, and then stack them right on top of each other, right? So open would look something like this, or sound something like this. Right? In the middle, what we've been working on. And then right on top of each other, the hardest one. Okay, and you'll hear those. You'll hear that last variation referred to sometimes as popped flams, because if you play both sticks at the same time on a drum head and not a practice pad, you get kind of this weird rebound out of the head where the sticks kind of pop and like fly up in the air in kind of a weird way. So that's what people mean if they say, popped flams. It means both sticks hitting at the same time, right? Again, very, very rare that you do that on purpose, but it's a nice thing to practice so that you can control it. All right, so just to recap, we have consecutive flams, right? And we're playing those wide, in the middle, and on top of each other, right? Same thing on the left hand. Wide, in the middle, and on top of each other. And then we've got alternating flams, okay? And we play those wide, in the middle, and on top of each other, all right? Practice all this stuff, and then when you start to see flams in the music that you're working on, it should be much more manageable at that point, okay? So happy practicing, and I'll see you next time.